has to be some common sense.
Yes, sir. They have the car stopped at 10th and Ranch Michael Byler.
We still don't know who pulled the trigger. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. I'm your host, retired NYPD Sergeant Bill Cannon, a 27-year veteran of the NYPD. You know, folks, this case again, now the Gilgo Beach case, Rex Heuermann's under arrest. We all know that. So conceivably, people are getting a little bit nervous, like, oh, what's happening? Why is there anything new to report? And in the last few days, yes, it slowed down. But what we do know is that, of course, they're still working on this case. There's still tons of information that they need, questions they need to answer. Here's the flyer on the screen to the case. Investigation continues. Notice of claim. Attorney Johnny Ray. Allegations against Asa Ellerup. And I'm going to cover some of those things later on, but I think it's more important now to go into, what is happening with the investigation. Seemingly, a lot of people would think, oh, they got him. It's quieted down. What next? What next for this Rex Heuermann? What's next for him, right? Some of the questions that I invariably had also as an investigator, there's a lot of investigative questions. And of course, some of the things I wanted to know, and I think the public would want to know, how many investigators are still assigned to the task force? We understood after they made the arrest that Rodney Harrison added 2 more, which was a good thing. Instead of deleting investigators, he was adding 2 more because there are so many questions that maybe perhaps will get lost in the shuffle. Sometimes a lot of broadcast stations somewhat focus on the National Enquirer type stuff rather than the real important investigative details. And some of the what I would call even peripheral noise made lately isn't as important as what you see up on the screen right now. This is known as the Gilgo Four: Marine Brainard-Barnes, Melissa Bartolome, Amberlynn Costello, and Megan Waterman. And what we do know also is that Marine Brainard-Barnes, listed as one of the Gilgo Four, Rex Heuermann hasn't been charged with that yet. And when we heard Police Commissioner Rodney Harrison spoke about it, he said that the DNA, the hair follicle that they had belonging or identified to be Rex Heuermann's was somewhat damaged. And just remember, it was older too. So perhaps they were thinking ahead where some smart defense attorney would say, oh, this isn't matching up scientifically. So again, they wanted to do more work on the case to make sure that they have that solid case. One of the other big questions I have is, how far are they willing to go back into Rex Heuermann's life? How far can they go back? How far are their records? How far are their financial records? How far are their cell phone records? How far does his ownership of vehicles go back that they can trace certain things? We know his home ownership goes back all the way to his childhood, where he's living in the home that he purchased from his mother. So that is a sure thing. They've already done so many things that we would have expected and asked questions about: digging up the land surrounding the home. That was done. We would have all asked that early on. Why wasn't the grounds dug up? Well, they did it. They dug up the ground. What next? How are we going to dig further? And another big question that just came up recently: are they checking out other locations near Massapequa Park? large tracts of land, parks that he perhaps frequented? Are they checking that? Are they going in there with cadaver dogs? Are they speaking again to potential witnesses that they have? Unfortunately, these are the things that don't make it on the 6 o'clock news. However, to an investigator, they are so, so important because that's, I used to say the famous thing when I used to teach at the criminal investigation course. When you ask questions, you get answers. And when you get answers, you get more questions. And it's a continuous cycle till you get the questions and the answers that bring you to a conclusion. And that's what investigation is. An investigation is a melding of the art and the science of investigation to come to positive conclusions. And there's so much science in this that it's almost beyond the scope of most of us, myself included, when they explain investigative genetic genealogy. It's understandable, but it's also very complicated. C.C. Moore, you have her explain it. Kristen Middleman, the owner of Othram Labs with her husband. In fact, I'm trying to get her to come on my show, and she said yes. I just don't have a date yet. I will be so thrilled to interview her because she's one of the giants in this whole science of investigative genetic genealogy. And it's almost like we take it for granted now that the police are going to use all of these tools to come to these conclusions. We all remember that. I have the picture on the screen of the belt that they released a while ago. Here we go, HM. Or is it WH if it was upside down? Does that belong to someone in the Heuermann family? All of these things are huge investigative questions that we have. And we want answers. We want to know whose was that? Was that someone in Heuermann's family? Was there DNA on that belt? Have they identified the DNA? So all of these questions, they may not ask in the media, but we're going to ask them. Karen Vergata, missing since 1996, just recently identified. Can they attach this young lady to Rex Heuermann? Or is that just another part of this case that may remain unanswered? Those are the questions that we all have as people that are watching this, people that are following this case. What do we know? What do we know about this? And a lot of these questions, a lot of these things were answered because they have been since the era of Rodney Harrison being the police commissioner of the Suffolk County Police. They have answered a great deal of these questions because he wants to be transparent. But there's still going to be tons more questions because going back, that question that no one wants to listen to is, why did it take 12 years to find Rex Heuermann? That's the question I don't think anyone really wants to answer. And they've answered in a way, but I think there need in-depth questions about that, both from Ray Tierney, the Suffolk County District Attorney, and from Rodney Harrison. And we're going to see what they, in fact, come up with in regards to answering. And they've answered it before, but maybe not in depth.
So the one thing I learned in NYPD, and I kind of shared this during our press conference, is I learned a lot regarding making sure we worked with all of our law enforcement officials. A lot of people may not be aware of this, but when I called and reached out to the FBI regarding them joining the task force, they were reluctant at first. They were concerned about, I guess, some past relationships where.
That says a ton right there, right? Rodney Harrison, when he came on board and he invited the FBI to come into the Gilgo Beach task force, they were reluctant based on how they were treated previously. So that's an important question, and he's going to probably have to speak to that again at some point. Look, I think his conduct, his his leadership that he brought to this investigation was second to none. But unfortunately, the people that came afterwards, Ray Tierney, Rodney Harrison, they're going to have to answer to what their predecessors did in this case.
They weren't necessarily part of being inside the loop of the case. So I reassured them. I said, that's something that you don't have to worry about any further. I need you. I need your expertise. I need your specialty teams to really be part of this team of investigators that I'm looking to put together. Secondly, and there's a lot of different avenues I want to talk about, but I thought it was important that we were transparent. You take a look at some of the podcasts and a lot of different things that they were saying about the Suffolk County Police Department and their role in Gilgo, and they're covering it up. I thought it was important that we became transparent. So one of the things that I took a closer look at is, well, why are we not sharing the Shannan Gilbert audio and letting it be known that we believe that it's an actual an unfortunate incident? Like, why are we not sharing that? And after I spoke to my detective lieutenant and a couple other investigators, that was something that we thought was important to share. So let people know, hey, listen, your perception of what happened, your perception of the Suffolk County Police Department is inaccurate. And playing that audio, I think, changed it in the right direction. So in essence, my NYPD experience, learning to be transparent, to get people to trust our organization, I believe was very, very helpful going forward with the investigation. So
let's talk a bit about the suspect. There's been a lot of reporting on how.
I think that Harrison, as well as the rest of the Gilgo Beach Task Force, when you speak about Shannan Gilbert, they don't feel that she is one of the victims of Rex Heuermann. They sort of go with the what the old investigators had said, that they're believing that she perhaps drowned or fleeing from that house. Now, that would, of course, everyone's going to question that. Oh, is this a conspiracy theory? Because Dr. Michael Baden, the former New York City office of the chief medical examiner, said that her hyoid bone was broken, which would indicate death from strangulation. But the previous autopsy didn't find that. So this is something I think that's going to be a bone of contention. And of course, later on in the broadcast, we're going to get to the attorney, Johnny Ray, who's all over the map, and with his allegations as well as things that he thinks occurred in this case.
Some re-examination of old evidence led to the arrest of the suspect, Rex Heuermann. But I would imagine, and you'll tell me, you had to go back and did you do re-interviews, new interviews? I mean, it was more than that, yes?
I not only did we do re-interviews, and there was a lot of different investigative steps that I can't tell you every little thing because I'm sure you understand, still going through a judicial process. But I even took the time out and sat down with John Ray and to see what type of information he had. He was claiming that the Suffolk County Police Department wasn't getting in contact with him regarding information that he had regarding Shannan Gilbert. So I made sure that I made myself available for him and see what he had to do or say, excuse me. I wanted to make sure that anybody that was in our custody was being debriefed. That's why I reached out to Earl Toulon and asked him to put a liaison that's going to speak to anybody who might have been involved in sex work between the time frame of 2007 and 2011, just to kind of re-interview them and see if they knew anything about the Gilgo investigation. So there were a lot of different avenues that we tackled regarding trying to rejuvenate this case. I even took a look at the Crime Stoppers tip award. It was at $25,000. I said, listen, we got to double it. We got to raise it to $50,000. That may get somebody putting the task force together, coming with different innovative ideas, things that I learned in the city, allowed us to be in a place where we are today, which was to identify Rex Heuermann and bring him into custody.
Well, I'm going to double back on Shannan Gilbert for a while. Is there anything in your investigation that changes the notion that her death was accidental or that she was not a part of the mass murders are out there?
It's a horrible accident. It's a horrible.
See, that's coming from Rodney Harrison, who's had a great deal of time to look at this case, has questioned a lot of different people, and of course, in his own words, he was able to use a lot of the things that he learned on the NYPD, working together with people. This task force, which was, we mentioned it numerous times, and that's what's going to get you answers: the art and the science of investigation. And I know a lot of people don't want to hear that Shannan Gilbert was not part of this, but unfortunately, this is what the conclusions they're coming to. Could that change if they get some kind of smoking gun evidence that is connected, or does connect Shannan Gilbert to Rex Heuermann? They have Rex Heuermann in jail. Would it be easy to include this case in there? Well, not unless you have evidence. You just can't include it. But that's what we're going to be looking at. And that's what this investigation, of course, now has all the time in the world to do it, because, well, I shouldn't say all the time in the world, but they're not in a rush because Rex Heuermann's not going anywhere. I'm going to now show you an interview with Johnny Ray on News Nation with Brian Enton. We showed the interview the other night with Chris Cuomo, and I don't know. I'm not sure I want to. These are really strong allegations, and conveniently with no witness that has come forward except to him. So let's watch a little bit of this and see what you think.
Gilgo Beach victims, Jessica Taylor and Shannan Gilbert. John, thank you also for joining us again tonight. We always appreciate your perspective. What did you make of the presser? I mean, I know you were there. You spoke afterwards after their lawyers sort of left. What did you make of the whole thing?
Well, what I make of it is very simple, and that is that this lady is conning everybody, and she's been doing that for years. She's managed to, for example, go on food stamps when her husband made the kind of money he made. They own numerous properties all over in several states. These are not poor people, and they've managed.
This lady he's referring to is Asa Ellerup, the wife of Rex Heuermann.
To raise at the last count today, $44,000 in the GoFundMe, and they're not victims. This is all a big put on, and what makes it worse is that it is overwhelmingly likely that this woman, Miss Ellerup, and the other adults, certainly Miss Ellerup, knew very well what was going on in that house with Mr. Heuermann downstairs in the basement with sex workers. And he had numerous
But how can you say that, though? I mean, John, that's a really big allegation to make. I mean, the police have said that they didn't know anything. And we've seen in other cases with serial killers that the families don't know anything. These guys are sickos and masterminds and psychotic, and they can compartmentalize. I mean, how can you go on national TV and say that you know that they knew something?
I can say that for several reasons. First of all, she lived in that little tiny house, and according to her own lawyers, there's no soundproof room downstairs. It would be virtually impossible in this day and age, where they've together for 27 years in that little tiny house, that she had no knowledge with cell phones and the internet. She had no knowledge whatsoever of what he was up to all those years downstairs. That's the first problem we have with this. The second problem is the way she's behaved is completely antithetical to what a person would do under similar circumstances if they were not involved. She not one of those people, her or her children, have said anything by way of sympathy for any of the victims of the serial killer, no matter what. They've just completely ignored that. They sit on the front porch, they laugh, they give the European middle finger to the press.
Well, listen, I mean, all the pictures I've seen them looking very sad outside, and maybe they're just, I mean, could they still just be in denial and shock and hoping that it's not true? And then the thing you said about her not knowing if he had escorts over there. I mean, people just have weird marriages. Maybe they had some kind of weird arrangement where he was allowed to have the escorts downstairs, having sex with the escorts downstairs. But that doesn't mean that she knew that he was a killer.
That doesn't mean she didn't. And she should be a suspect when 2 of her hairs are found on the tape wrapping up 2 of the victims. She's at least a suspect. But there's also another factor, which I had the good fortune to come across, and that is a witness. And there is a witness who is very credible. I know I pull rank by saying that because I'm 41 years in the business, and I've done many cross-examinations and 33 different
to me, how convenient to have this witness that only he has spoken to. If this witness exists, if this witness is so credible, then why isn't Johnny Ray, sounds like a funny name in a way, Attorney John Ray, let's say that sounds more respectable, Attorney John Ray turning this witness over to the police who are in charge of this investigation, not he or the other 2 attorneys representing the family.
Homicides I've been involved in one way or another. So, I bring that to the table. I've examined this witness for hours, and she is credible, and in detail, she is credible. And she's not coming forward with her name at this point, and I'm going to respect that.
So
that's my job.
What is the witness? What did the witness tell you though? Like, tell us about this witness.
What I hear unquestionably is that Rex Heuermann was bringing sex workers frequently into his home over the years, spent a small fortune on him, and that the wife was clearly very aware of this and even indicated it actively at some point. So I have that plus all these inferences that you can draw from the way this woman has behaved in this whole thing. And when you put the 2 together, it's pretty hard to deny that she should be a suspect. Perhaps the police did not consider her a suspect initially because she seemed to have alibis for when 3 of those women disappeared. But those alibis are fungible, like anything else. And if she was away in Iceland on a trip and so on, do we know when these girls were actually killed, the day they were killed? Do we know how long they were kept before they were buried? Do we know whether they were still alive and then were killed later on? You don't know any of those things. So you really need to be suspicious. And that's what I'm saying is you need to be suspicious.
I understand what you're saying, being suspicious and keeping an open mind. And I'm sure hopefully the police are with everything involving this case. It just seems like we don't really have the evidence right now to call out the family like that.
Thank you for watching.
So, folks, it's you're the ones out there that obviously, whether you believe Johnny Ray or not, I don't know, but I have questions about that. If this witness is really so trustworthy and so telling the truth and vettable, as we would say, she's vettable. Why hasn't he turned her over to the police rather than going on all these TV shows? That's been his MO through the 12 or 13 years he's been involved in this case in the representation of the family of Shannan Gilbert. Why does he go on TV instead of to the authorities? That's one of the questions I have. And I think it's a question that needs to be answered. One of the things, the commonalities we call it in this case, of course, is the sex workers. And I'm going to play a little bit of one of them who also came across to the media and was talking about how she had gone out on dates with Rex Heuermann.
Ads with a Google generated number that you can contact me on. So I'm not sure which one he contacted me through. I tried reaching out to one of the sites and actually asking if they could pull the messages between us on that now deleted account, and they wouldn't do it because I wasn't the owner of his account.
So law enforcement, just so the viewers and listeners know, they can subpoena that information, but you can't get that information.
Yeah, and not only that, because I was on so many sites with the generated number, there's no way for me to tell you with absolute certainty which one he contacted me through.
So you think it was 10 or 11 years ago, you know, so that
It was summer of 2015.
summer of 2015.
Yes.
So when he reaches out to you, he calls you on the number. It's a Google generated number, you said.
He
And
didn't
then,
call, we texted.
oh, I'm sorry. Okay. So you guys texted over the Google generated number. Do you remember what he said? Or was it just like, hey, I'd like to meet up with you?
Initially, it was, hey, I'd like to meet up with you. Then it was, he wanted me to go directly to his house in Massapequa. And when I tell you I'm like the most locationally challenged person on earth, I can live somewhere for 5 years and I still need to GPS getting home. So I was very unfamiliar with Massapequa. And I said to him, you know, I don't want to go directly to your house. I don't know the area. I don't have friends there. I'd feel a lot more comfortable if we met in a public local place near me. And if I'm comfortable, sure, I'll come back to your place.
But he wanted you to come to his home.
He wanted me to come directly to his home. He didn't want to meet at a public restaurant.
Knowing what you know now, because the police are saying the dates he would go on with the women that he's accused of murdering happened when his wife was out of town. So does that freak you out? Kind of thinking about that in hindsight.
No, what freaks me out in hindsight is thinking that this man sat across from me bragging because he knew I was in such a vulnerable position in my life that I wouldn't go to the cops because, one, I probably wouldn't be believed, or two, I'd probably be arrested. But I think that's what freaks me out the most, is that he may have put hypotheticals or said, you know, he or what he thought, but it was somebody who had done it and been there describing those crimes. And I think that's what scared me the most.
So tell me about the date. Tell me exactly where you met in public and what happened from there, if you don't mind.
So we didn't meet at his car. I know a lot of people were like, did you see what kind of car he was driving? No. So he met me directly in front of the restaurant, the steam room in Port Jeff. We walked in, we grabbed a seat, we ordered drinks. He was surprised that I don't drink alcohol. I don't know why that's such a surprising thing to people. And he ordered his drink. We ordered some food. I don't remember what he got, but I know I got salmon and rice because I was allergic to shellfish. And we started talking. And everything seemed normal, very basic, like, you know, generic chatter that you would use, you know, when you're first meeting a person, first date. And then switched to, he asked if I was interested in true crime. And at that point, it still wasn't weird for me. I actually got excited because I am a true crime fanatic. Like, I could quote very weird, random things from serial killers or know facts that very few people know. Like, very, very heavily involved in, you know, the truth.
You know, folks, you got to, to decide whether or not she's credible or not. And I don't know if I believe you. I think that to me, she sounds coached in the way that she's spoken to a lot of people about this. And somehow, in my opinion, she is saying the sensational and what people want to hear rather than what she actually recollected. And that's, you know, that concerns me because really, if all of the information she has, I would question, has she been interviewed by the Suffolk County Police? And of course, the minute she showed up on TV, they're going to be calling her. We'd like to interview you. Did they, in fact, set up an interview with her? Did they not? These are some of the questions that I would have. And I think the chances that she was interviewed by the police are very good. Whether or not her information is, if they can check it, can they cross-check it? Is it come down to the date she's talking about, or is she totally wrong about those dates? A lot of people in the chat said she sounds like she's high on Valium. I agree. The way she's sluttering words, like talking like that. She doesn't drink alcohol, yeah. So it does sound like she's on some type of medication. Maybe she needed it to be able to be interviewed on television. But so, that's what, when you connect these dots also with Johnny Ray, who, as I said on a previous show, he never met a camera he didn't like. In essence, the guy is on every TV show known to man. Now, the other thing that came up this week, and it's also a big part of this case, is, of course, the attorneys, the one attorney, Robert Macedonio and Zev Matev, I think his name is, who now filed a notice of claim on behalf of Asa Ellerup and her 2 adult children, because the police wrecked the house during the course of serving a search warrant. And one of the things that I would be pretty confident about is that before the police served this warrant, before they enforced this search warrant, I'm pretty sure they would have videotaped the location. Videotaped, possibly still photos, but guaranteed they memorialized it so that for this very purpose. Now, and look, there's no doubt they did damage to the house, but let's keep it real. They're searching the home of a serial killer. As I said, they're going to break things. They're going to break into the tub. They're going to break into the sink. They're going to break into walls. So I don't know why people are so shocked that the police did damage. And there is recourse. They now have attorneys that are representing them, representing their interests to fix the home, fix the damage that the police did. Does it sound callous the way I'm presenting this? But look, there is no methodology for the police, again, or the government, that they don't do it. Maybe they should, to bring in the merry maids and clean up your house. I don't think there's a procedure to do that. This is Robert Macedonio, the attorney for Asa Ellerup.
Bob, first of all, how did you come to represent Asa Ellerup? Have you known her for a long time, or did you just meet her through your current representation?
We met her through a current representation. We were retained on a Saturday morning after her husband was arrested, just to be a buffer between her and the police department and handle all communications between her and the DA's office and the police department. And then we followed up with discussing the marital issues and filing for the divorce.
So you're representing her on a number of fronts.
Correct. We are her attorneys for all the matters right now.
Okay. Why did she decide to file for divorce? I think the answer may seem obvious to many people, but this is still somebody she has spent decades of her life with. So I'm sure this has come as a shock.
It's come as a shock, but as you can imagine, even if any percentage of the allegations that have been in the media are true, it's been an irreparable breakdown of the marriage, and she just needs to move forward protecting herself at this point. It's going to take years for her husband's matters to play out in court, and honestly, we just need to protect her and have her move forward as quick as we can.
And when you say protect her, what do you mean by that?
She's obviously, whatever the liability he may be involved with civilly, we don't want to be responsible for any of that. She's not involved in any of this. She needs to make decisions as an independent person, not being a married person, protect her and her children, and just honestly move forward, putting her life back together. Her life has been thrown into complete upheaval.
I was going to ask you, how is she doing? We see the photographs of her in the news on media websites. And I didn't know her before this happened. None of us did, but she definitely looks stressed, as you would imagine she would be, and probably like she hasn't slept in weeks.
She's emotionally and physically exhausted. Like you said, she hasn't slept in weeks. It goes where you can't get an hour or two of sleep here or there. There's not been a full night sleep that's gone on. Since they returned to the home, the media bangs on the door throughout the days, even late into the night, which then gets the dog barking. And just between that and her children, crying themselves to sleep at night, they're in their 20s and 30s, but still This is a traumatic event for the entire family. For her, and I mean her and her 2 children. I'm not speaking about her husband, what they're going through right now. And they're innocent victims in this whole matter.
I was going to ask you about that. People always speculate and ask questions. Did she know anything? Was she involved? Did the family have any inkling whatsoever? And it's been reported, and in the bail application, it said that Asa was out of town when these alleged murders, they're murders, but when his alleged involvement occurred in these crimes. Is there anything she's shared with you that you can share with us that indicates that she may be looking back and hindsight's 2020?
She has no independent knowledge of even the dates and times that they're alleging these crimes to take place. The only thing that we've gained from this is what the media has put out. The DA's bail application, as you just stated, eliminates her from being in the jurisdiction when these crimes are committed. They, I'm sure, have extensively investigated that prior to making that statement, or they wouldn't have ruled her out in their bail application. So I'm confident that she had no idea any of this was going on and was not involved in any of it.
Has she indicated that their marriage was a happy one? I mean,
folks, one of the things you have to realize is that prior to making the arrest of Rex Heuermann, they had been on him for about a year. So they were checking. I mean, granted, there was a voluminous amount of things to check, but they were also at the time checking his wife and his kids, their background, of course, doing financial reports, the cell phone reports, as many things as they could do investigatively to check him out. Right away after Rex Heuermann was arrested, very soon thereafter, I say right away, they cleared Asa Ellerup, the police, right out of Rodney Harrison's mouth that we don't believe she's involved. We don't believe she knew anything about this. Are we satisfied with this, or do we think now, because Johnny Ray is coming across and some other people saying, oh, she knew about this, including that sex worker we just had on, that he was going to bring her to his house and she refused to do that. Are we thinking that the police got this wrong and that Asa Ellerup is involved? I mean, look, we're not involved in this investigation. We haven't sat down with the interviews. Did the police attempt to interview Asa Ellerup when Rex Heuermann was arrested? Absolutely. Absolutely. Could she have immediately invoked counsel and refused to speak? That could have happened too, right? But they came out extremely early in this investigation and said that Asa Ellerup is not involved. She knew nothing about this. She was blindsided by this. Every time that he was meeting with a sex worker, as verified by the burner phones, she was out of the country. Do we believe they did an extensive enough interview to verify that information? That's the questions that all of us would have. And on the screen are 4 of the victims. That's who this case is about. I think we're hearing a lot of extraneous sort of what you would consider, I don't know. I don't want to say noise, because certainly Asa Ellerup is a human being and she's got some problems here with what had occurred. And is she a victim? Yeah, I would say so, not in the same way that the Gilgo Four are, but yes, she is a victim. And these are some of the things that we have to consider. She's absolutely a victim. And was Rex Heuermann leading a double life? And apparently, according to Rodney Harrison, the police commissioner of the Suffolk County Police, yes, Rex Heuermann was leading a double life. Father, member of the Massapequa Park community, business owner, architect, seedy sex offender. Really, right? Searching child porn sites on his computer. Had this double life of this psychosexual, sadistic killer. Alleged. We'll say alleged again.
I find it hard to believe if Rex Heuermann is indeed found to be responsible for these homicides, that there wasn't any behavior toward the family that might have been, maybe strange or violent. I just don't know.
No indication of any, violence in the marriage between her and him. And again, if it's found to be true that he did these, it was a complete double life that she was unaware of. She's a
Right.
homemaker. She raised the 2 children. She's a homemaker. She's raised the 2 children, and that's it.
We saw that there was a GoFundMe page started for her to raise some money for her and her family by the daughter of a serial killer. How is she feeling about somebody who's been through this before doing something nice for her on her behalf?
And she feels good about it. If anybody knows what Asa's going through, it would be someone that's lived through it. We could all give our opinion and all try to comfort as much as we possibly, can. But the young woman that started the GoFundMe for her has lived it. Her family's lived it. She's suffered the public, scorn of her dad being known as the happy face killer, and has been very supportive throughout this since the beginning.
Tell me about the children, if you would. I saw a photograph on Newsday's website.
Folks, we keep hearing children, and Asa Ellerup, Rex Heuermann's children are adults. The daughter's 26 and the son's 34. And apparently the son has special needs. So yes, they could maybe almost consider that. But they're not children. They are adults. They're adults living in the same household as their adult parents.
Her daughter Victoria and Asa, I would assume in your office. I don't know that, but it looked like they were in some type of office.
I think they were in my office, yes.
Yeah. What are they like?
They're doing better. They're doing better as the days go on. In the early time, it was just a complete, emotional upheaval of their entire lives. Just hour by hour, trying to process what actually happened and trying to retrace what life was like when these alleged crimes happened, which is almost impossible for any of us to put a timeline together. What were we doing 10 years ago today? I don't know. I couldn't tell you without really exhaustively going through any documents or any items I may have to remind me of that. So people are trying to do that. And all those documents or anything they would be able to do that with have been taken out of the house.
Your staff shared photos with us of the interior of the house. And I don't know what it looked like before, but it seriously looks like a tornado has torn through there. Did the police do all of that in their search? Or, were there things kind of laying around before that? Or
No,
tell me.
The police went through every item in that house to the point of even emptying cat litter boxes out, which were not emptied and all over the house. They were, there's 3 cat litter boxes in the house when the police entered. They were emptied out and the cat litter was thrown all over the house. There's no reason for that. There's no forensic value in that. There's no evidentiary value in that. So I'm not sure why that was done. Victoria, her daughter, was an avid game player on PS5, PlayStation 5. The game was actually broken in half. Why that kind of stuff happens, I don't know. Whether it's just overly aggressive police work being in the house, it just makes no sense for that kind of destructive behavior to go on when you're looking for evidence of alleged crimes.
Folks, this is Police Off the Cuff, real crime stories. If you like real crime, true crime from a police perspective, go on our YouTube, hit that subscribe button, give us a thumbs up, ring that bell. And if you want to contribute to us, we have a Patreon with 3 different levels. And we also have a YouTube channel for our fans, our subscribers, our friends. You see the folks in the green font. They're part of our YouTube channel members. Lady Prudence, thank you so much for the $4.99 super sticker. Really very much appreciated. There's so many aspects, again, to this case. The sex workers being interviewed by the Suffolk County Sheriff's Office. I think a great investigative tool. They could potentially know things about this case because it's a small community. It's a small community of Johns purchasing or using these sex workers. Do these sex workers, escorts, whatever you'd like to call them, do they speak to each other? Absolutely. So the investigative resources, the investigative gems that you could possibly get from interviewing these people are huge for the case. And, the Suffolk County Sheriff's Office, who was part of this Gilgo Beach task force, very articulate guy. I'm going to play a little bit of him right now.
still has to be examined from a forensic perspective.
But of the items collected during the investigation, Toulon says the recovery of Heuermann's DNA is invaluable to the case.
And once we were able to get some DNA evidence, which we were able to get off the pizza crust, off that and the box, pretty much solidified that we actually had the right person.
According to court documents, investigators recovered a pizza box Heuermann threw away in January 2023. The Suffolk County Crime Lab analyzed a piece of leftover crust connecting it to Heuermann. Investigators also found hairs, likely belonging to both Heuermann and his wife, on the bodies of multiple victims. Officials also confirm his wife was out of the tri-state area when multiple murders were committed.
There is a possibility of transference if he hugged his wife and a piece of her hair was to get on his clothing, and that happened to be the clothing he used when he committed the murder. It just creates the higher probability that he is the killer, because if his wife is out of the country on the days that the crimes were committed and her DNA is at the crime scene, which can only be attributed to him with his DNA also, makes it more probable that he is the.
Folks, we have spoken about this really sort of ad nauseum. It's something called transfer evidence, and I feel like I'm being redundant, but there's new people in here today. Transfer evidence, obviously, if you live with somebody or multiple people, their hairs, their skin cells, all that can transfer onto your clothing. Or in this case with Rex Heuermann, he used these burlap bags, the camouflage burlap bags. The bags were inside the house. The potentiality his wife's hair got on those bags, yeah, that's another way for transfer evidence. So we can't say because hairs from her body were found on 3 of the victims that she was involved. No, we believe, and Sheriff Toulon just said, yeah, it's potentially transfer evidence. And I mention all the time, any criminal justice majors out there, Locard's theory, principle. If I said theory, Ed Wallace would kill me. Locard's principle of exchange. When you go into a crime scene, you bring something with you. When you leave that crime scene, you take something out from that. And that's trace evidence or transfer evidence. Evidence that is transferred. Same thing. Rex Heuermann goes into his car. He was just in his house. He's got hairs on his body from his house that don't belong to him. They could be his wife's, his daughters, his sons. Those hairs get transferred inside the vehicle. Could that also get transferred into a potential victim? 100%. 100%.
Obviously, the most clear suspect in this case.
In addition to the DNA collection, Toulon says Heuermann's use of burner phones stood out immediately.
There was a box created in that Massapequa area where the phone calls were going to sex workers. Then we were able to look at a second box and where his employment was, and we're still getting those same sex workers, the same burner phones. And so now we know that we're on a good lead.
Officials say Heuermann used fake names, email accounts, and burner phones as a means of contacting his victims. On multiple occasions, investigators used his American Express records to show he was in the same location as multiple of the burner phones when they were used to contact victims. But he reached out to potential victims too.
That are victims of human trafficking, and asking them. We did come across 2 individuals that he actually reached out to by phone. There are various social media platforms that sex workers use to communicate with each other.
In the years leading up to Heuermann's arrest, Toulon reveals the alleged killer reached out to multiple women in regards to sex trafficking. He says the information was gathered when 2 women who had previously been in touch with Heuermann were booked into the Suffolk County Jail.
If a John was to pay, give them a very good tip, they can put that and they'll put the phone number of the John. This way, when that phone number, when that John tries to reach out to another sex worker, they know that that phone number, that particular individual gives a good tip. If someone was extremely aggressive, if someone was abusive, that's how they communicate. And so these are some of the things that we were able to uncover inside of our facilities, working with the victims of human trafficking. There were 2 persons in our custody that he had actually reached out to, but never actually made any physical contact. Called them by cell phone, spoke to them, but that was as far as it went.
Toulon says this information was used as evidence in Heuermann's arrest. When Law and Crime Network reached out to the Suffolk County Sheriff's Office for more information about the former inmates and a timetable of their relationships with Heuermann, officials said the information could not be released as the investigation is still ongoing and either.
Just a well thought out investigative resource. The Suffolk County Sheriff's Office. I know that I've said this before. I'm going to say it again. Debriefing people. In this case, arrested sex workers. Look at how small that community is or was, where some of these same folks that had contact with Rex Heuermann reported it when they were interviewed. Now they see him all over the news. That guy called me, and we spoke about how the whole escort service, the sex worker world is a small world. And so are the people that use the services. It's a small world. It's a dangerous world. It's a scary world. And Rex Heuermann had been part of this world for a long time. And again, the Suffolk County Sheriff's Office incarcerated sex workers. Let's talk to them. Let's see what they have. And the Suffolk County Sheriff's Office became a big part of the Gilgo Task Force. This is Ray Tierney.
Their former inmate could play a part in future court proceedings. In the months leading up to his arrest, Toulon says Heuermann continued to look up escorts.
We do know that he was frequenting sex workers very close to when he was arrested. So this is someone that really has some depravity in his being.
Toulon says he's seen Heuermann twice since his arrest, once in the Suffolk County Jail and the other at Heuermann's arraignment.
At the arraignment, from what I saw, was someone I didn't see any contriteness or any emotion. He did what he was told by the court officers. After the judge had remanded him to the custody of the sheriff's office, he then went back. He was processed by the court officers and then transferred over to the Suffolk County Sheriff's Office, where we have him in a housing area under different precautions that we may have than with other incarcerated individuals.
Inside the Suffolk County Jail, Toulon confirms Heuermann is being held on suicide watch.
Anyone that comes in with any type of notoriety, especially if it's media worthy and the heinousness of the crimes that he's being accused, we would want to put them in a separate area because we wouldn't want anything to happen. We want justice to be served in the courts, not in the jails. So we do have staff videotape. We want to make sure that everything is done to make sure that this individual is brought to justice. He is under suicide watch, but that's under our mental health. They're not employees of the Suffolk County Sheriff's Office. And so if he was to stay on a suicide.
When asked whether there is another suspect in the case, Toulon had this to say.
So folks, Rex Heuermann going from being a free man to incarcerated at the Suffolk County jail facility. And of course, if you know the mentality of inmates, someone would love to stick a knife in him, So that's part of the jail, the correctional officers, to protect him, so that you heard Sheriff Toulon say that we want him to get justice in the courts and not justice, street justice or jail justice, if you will. So they want to keep him healthy. They watch him. Potentially, he could be. His actions could be getting videotaped. That's all part of being in jail, and that's what their job is, of course, is to make sure that he doesn't become a victim of jailhouse justice and someone stick a shiv in him and while he's awaiting a trial. This was this week. They of course took Rex Heuermann's his DNA, a court order actually, to have his DNA collected via a search warrant ordered by the judge.
A judge ordered suspected Gilgo Beach serial killer Rex Heuermann to submit a DNA swab, despite his lawyer's objections. The judge said, contrary to the defense's contentions, there is probable cause to believe Heuermann committed the 3 murders with which he is charged. The swab will be taken in the presence of Heuermann's attorney. Investigators want to compare the sample with DNA recovered from a pizza crust discarded outside Heuermann's office and a hair recovered from one of the victims.
So that's just, everyone questions is they already had his DNA from the pizza. And for some of you folks in the chat, the DNA undoubtedly was left from saliva from his mouth on the crust, not from the box. Could there have been skin cells on the box? Yeah, but most likely, since they swabbed the crust, most likely they got the DNA from saliva cells. So that's, but now you may ask, then why did they need to take an exemplar, a warrant to take his DNA? Well, because an attorney can argue, oh, how do you know he didn't throw this pizza box out and he didn't eat it? How do you know that? They could have argued that. They could have came up with a million other arguments. So to get rid of that argument, let's see if we can get a judge to forcibly compel Rex Heuermann. Carly, thank you for becoming a Police Off the Cuff YouTube member. Thank you so much. Very much appreciated. Welcome aboard. Welcome aboard, guys. Police Off the Cuff, real crime stories. And if you're not subscribed to us, go on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. I see all our friends. Karen Cole, legal-minded friend. The Pranzos are in the house. Kim Alliston, thank you for all you do, Kim. You're fantastic. You're quick. You're right on top of some people that need to be put in a timeout. Thank you so much for that. Appreciate it. There's so many places this case has to go. And, some of the things even that Rodney Harrison said was very interesting about why did they arrest him when they arrested him? And that's a big question I think we all have. Why was he arrested? Why did they take him down when they did? And one of the biggest reasons was because they were afraid that he was going to continue killing. But actually, the number one reason that Rodney Harrison said, even before that, was they were afraid of the integrity of the case. What does that mean? The integrity of the case. What that means, they were afraid that information that they were onto him could leak out to him. You think when there's 300 subpoenas and search warrants that possibly one of those entities that received a subpoena could maybe even inadvertently leak it to the suspect? Could that happen? Absolutely. Absolutely. So that was a big reason. And what would have happened if the information, the evidence would have leaked out? Rex Heuermann could have been off to the races. He could have fled the country. And then now they got to find him, So that was one of the reasons, as well as the danger he exhibited, that he was still contacting sex workers. He was still using burner phones. So that very much concerned them that he could kill again, he could kill again. One of the biggest things in this case, and so many of the cases we've been covering lately, is the science. The Idaho case with the touch DNA on the knife sheath. We're talking about Brian Koberger and the victims, the 4 victims, the Idaho, the 4 students, Ethan Chapin, Zana Canodal, Madison Mogan, and Kaylee Gonsalves. That knife sheath, the DNA on that knife sheath, even though it's touch DNA, and his attorneys now are working on trying to discredit that DNA. Now, with this investigative genetic genealogy, it is a game changer. And the more I hear about it and the more I learn about it, the more amazing it is to me. And let me play a little bit of this, talking about the science to these investigations.
Genealogy to identify Karen Vergata. Suffolk County officials haven't said whether they believe Vergata's murder is connected to the Gilgo Four. Rex Heuermann is a 55-year-old architect from Massapequa Park. He faces charges in the murders of 3 of the Gilgo Four. He's pleaded not guilty to the murders of Melissa Barthelemy, Amber Costello, and Megan Waterman. The DA says he is the prime suspect in the murders of Maureen Brainard-Barnes. Heuermann insists through his attorney that he didn't do this and that he's innocent. Joining me to discuss the technology used to identify Karen Vergata, the Fire Island Jane Doe, is Kristen Middleman. She's the Chief Development Officer with Othram Labs.
You know, folks, I just want to mention this. Kristen Middleman, amazing. Her and her husband, they own Othram Labs, which is in Texas. One of the premier investigative genetic genealogy labs in the nation. I believe they made the ID on Brian Kohberger in the Idaho case. Tremendous, tremendous, tremendous work. I mean, it's just, you know, we talk about scientists like Jonas Salk, Louis Pasteur, and these are Madame Curie. I want to throw a female in there or else I'll get killed. Amazing. This is as big as that. This is going to be, for the 21st century, what, you know, just an incredible piece of technology. And Kristen here and CC Moore and other pioneers in this field are going to just hopefully one day make serial killers and serial rapists a thing of the past, because the technology will catch them early on before they get to be a career criminal.
Othram helped identify the Fire Island Jane Doe and has worked on other cases across the country. We've featured them in other cases before as well. Kristen, thanks for coming on to Sidebar. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me on.
I want to start at the beginning with this, because this testing is different from your typical DNA testing. Of course, you have to have a DNA profile to do what you do. But you guys use a different type of profile to do the investigative genetic genealogy. It's called a SNP, if I am saying that right. So tell us how you really start at the beginning and go about building these family trees and everything like that off of a DNA profile, an STR profile that you later, I guess, I don't know, develop another type of profile for.
Absolutely. So standard forensic testing that's been used for 30 years, DNA testing that has gone to court all this time, is known as STR testing. There you're looking at 20 STR markers and you're comparing them to the known database of perpetrators that is owned by the FBI, CODIS. So sometimes you guys may have heard that as CODIS testing. If someone is in the known perpetrator database, then you have a direct hit. But your DNA would have to be in there, or maybe the DNA of your child, like a direct familiar relationship. What we do is we build profiles that have hundreds and hundreds of thousands of markers, up to 1 million markers. So these profiles have all of these SNP markers that you just discussed. And when you upload those to genealogical databases consented for law enforcement use, you're able to get really distant relationships. The more markers you have, the more distant relationships you can actually reach. And so you can get a 6th cousin, a 5th cousin, a 4th cousin, and all of us are related to some degree. Most areas in the United States, they were founded from a few key families. And so to some degree, there'll be some relative in there. And they're not the relatives that come home for Thanksgiving with you, not the relatives that you know or you would call, but there would be some match in these databases. Then our genealogists go in, our genealogy team, just like you said, and they look at these matches and they figure out who the most recent common ancestor is on a tree. And then they build the tree back down until the puzzle piece that the person that we're trying to identify fits right into a family tree. At that point, we return that lead back to investigators and they contextualize it within their investigation.
So let's talk.
You know, I've heard many people try to explain investigative genetic genealogy, and I believe Kristen Middleman explained it made it very simple for all of us to understand. And that's fantastic. Also, another genetic genealogist by the name of C.C. Moore. I think she does a great job also. I'm sure it's so much more complicated than how she just explained it, but she made it understandable for us. And I thank her for that. In fact, I told you guys, I'm trying to get Kristen Middleman to come on Police Off the Cuff. And I think she would be a fabulous guest.
Talk about Karen Vergata, because we know that part of her remains, it's so gruesome and grisly, it's sad, her legs and feet were located in one area in a plastic bag on Fire Island, but then her skull was located much later than that. So you may have had a better DNA sample to work with from the remains from the legs, but maybe not the skull so much. So tell us where you began with that. Obviously, you took her DNA and did your work.
Yes, we took the remains and we extracted DNA, and then we proceeded to do forensic grade genome sequencing. That's this technique where we do a feasibility analysis before we consume the DNA, because sometimes when you're dealing with perpetrator cases, you only have a finite amount of DNA in the tube. And if you consume it, all DNA testing, all DNA sequencing is a destructive process. You're actually consuming someone's last chance of getting justice. And so we do this feasibility analysis that allows us to, in advance, predict whether or not we can build one of these profiles with the properties of the DNA found in that sample. Because we've identified and returned leads on over 1,000 cases, and because we've done it all in-house, this has become a truth set. Each case becomes a standard. So we compared the DNA from her case to the previous DNA samples that we have run here at Othram that we know we can successfully build a profile from, and proceeded once we knew that, yes, we could build one of these profiles. Then we did the sequencing, built a profile that had hundreds and hundreds of thousands of markers, and that was uploaded to genealogical databases consented for law enforcement use. And in this case, we worked with the New York office from the FBI, and they actually did the genealogical research to put her back on a family tree.
Okay,
Once they
so
identified her,
Go ahead.
they actually called the family and asked if there's someone missing. That's what happens each time. And her father did say that she was missing. They were looking for her. And the last time he had spoken to her was Valentine's Day in 1996.
So I assume then you requested, or the FBI requested, a standard, a sample from her father.
That's right. And then there's a confirmation test that confirms our hypothesis that it was her. And so that's what happens each time, whether it's, and if a direct relationship isn't available, we can do a kin-snip confirmation, which allows you to use a further out relative. But in this case, her father was still alive. In fact, he passed away a few months after finding out what happened to his daughter.
Oh my goodness. So did he feel some sense of peace, or are you able to describe to us or for us how he felt, or his reaction upon learning once and for all where his daughter was located?
Yeah, so what has been reported is that he had been looking for her continuously. It was his only child, and he had hired a private investigator to find her through the years. And maybe he was holding on because after he found out what had happened to her, he was able to pass away, at least knowing the truth. You know, I've met hundreds of families over the last few years doing this job that are missing someone. And I have to say, their life stops the moment when their loved one is gone, or at the moment where they don't know what happened to their loved one or who is responsible. I've met families that live in the same home for 47, 50 years, hoping someone will come back and knock on the door, or someone will know where their loved one is. Families that go back to their favorite place weekly, trying to see if maybe they would run into them. Families that go back to the crime scene, hoping they run into the perpetrator. They hire investigators. They get online every day looking for their loved one, and they can't move forward until they know the truth.
As far as Karen goes, did you do any work to see, at least on her legs, or had anybody else done any work on her legs to see if there was other DNA, maybe a swab to see if a perpetrator's DNA could have been on her body parts?
I'm sure. Every time unidentified remains are found, and this is a case, I'm sure that there was work done to see what other DNA was found there as well.
Amazing. Just, I mean, the work that these folks are doing, I mean, is just, besides the fact that it's law enforcement to use it. And again, guys, not every DNA site is law enforcement allowed to use. They're not allowed to use 23andMe or Ancestry.com. There's only a couple of sites. GEDmatch is one of them. I think there's one other one that are friendly to law enforcement. So the other sites that the most common ones, 23andMe and Ancestry.com, I believe they would require a law enforcement subpoena. And many times these companies fight the subpoenas. In essence, they don't want to allow law enforcement to use their sites. And I mean, I guess in one way, it's understandable because people would be reluctant to submit their DNA if they knew that it was law enforcement was going to be allowed to search it and to use it for investigations. So some of these companies do not allow it. Folks, if you're looking for a good attorney in the New York City metropolitan area, then Joe Murray is your man. Joe's a retired NYPD police officer and a fantastic defense attorney. You can reach Joe at 718-514-3855. Email him at joe@jmurray-law.com. His website is jmurray-law.com. Joe Murray is not only a fantastic attorney, but a huge supporter of Police Off the Cuff, and we really appreciate all the work that Joe Murray is doing and has done for us. You know, folks, what are some of the things, some of the questions, and I do read the chat, some of the questions that a lot of you folks have is like, are they searching other areas in search of potential remains of victims in regards to Rex Heuermann? And I don't know specifically, people mentioned some huge park in Massapequa Park. I would think that if they had leads or they had information that was potentially a dumping ground, they would do so. I don't know if they can just go out to bodies of land without any other information that perhaps Rex Heuermann dumped something there, that they would just search it. I don't know if they have that type of manpower, because that would be a sort of an investigation without any lead, that you're just doing it because this is a big body of land and he lives near it. I mean, if they had unlimited resources, unlimited manpower, I could see that they would do that. As far as them doing that now, I don't have any independent knowledge that they are doing that. However, proud American, there will always be serial killers. Criminals adjust. When law enforcement got fingerprints, criminals wore gloves. People put camera on their property. Criminals wear masks, hoodies, etc. Yes, proud American, I agree with you. Criminals will adjust, but this technology, look, DNA itself was a game changer. DNA is a shocking evidentiary resource for law enforcement and to criminals that they cannot. First of all, most of them can't even understand it. right? And now with all the different the eras, of DNA when it first came about, the first hit, I believe, in New York State was in 1997, and I know DNA was around before that, but the first time it linked cases together on a serial killer in New York City was a serial killer named Aaron Key, who was killing young women from the housing projects in Spanish Harlem. And that was the first time DNA was used to link those cases. And they talk about the technology. Initially, it was RFLP, restriction fragment length polymorphism. And then there was something called polymerase chain reaction, PCR, that was used. You may recognize that with the COVID test. And then she mentioned STR, short tandem repeats. And then, of course, they have mitochondrial DNA. And the newest one, of course, Anjanette Levy referred to SNPs, SNP, and that stands for single nucleotide polymorphism. So all of these techniques now, SNPs, you heard Kristen Middleman say, STR, which is the most common, or they call that the CODIS application of DNA, there's only about 20 different markers that they can identify. SNPs has hundreds of thousands, up to 1 million markers. But then is there a downside to SNPs? And there is that, you hear CeCe Moore talk about it, that she said it should never, ever be used to establish probable cause in an arrest against a defendant. However, it can be used as a lead. So you get those leads and then you build the case around that lead. So potentially, is it amazing? Absolutely. It's an incredible piece of evidentiary science for the 21st century. The best thing we've seen in evidence you want to compare since fingerprints, the best thing.
Is she reporting tonight that authorities may be close to charging him? Are you closer to charging him in that case tonight?
So it's going to take a little time. I'm not sure exactly what the time frame is, but because the hair follicle was somewhat damaged and trying to match the DNA connected to the hair, it may take longer than we anticipate. But if it does come back as a match, then we'll definitely charge him with the murder to Mrs. Barnes.
Meantime,
Rodney Harrison, you cannot but admire his coolness under pressure, the way he answers questions. He's got it all. He really, look, yeah, I'm biased because he's NYPD and I think he's fantastic. But the way he answers questions, look, clearly he says, I don't know everything. There's people out there that think they do. And he clearly says, I don't. But, as soon as we have the evidence to make this arrest, we'll do so. He's not jumping, oh, yeah, we're going to do that in a minute. We're going to do it in 10 minutes. No. As soon as we have the necessary evidence, we're going to move on this case, but not until,
authorities telling CNN that they're really operating under the assumption that Heuermann may not have stopped killing even after the remains were first discovered more than a decade ago. Bryn mentioned that they are, other New York City, perhaps other areas as well, tips still coming into that tip line. When you look at how big this could be, do you believe this suspect could potentially be responsible for other murders that may not even at this point be on the radar?
Well, I stated this before. We'll see. But this investigation is still ongoing. The task force will remain intact. We'll continue to search and follow any types of tips that may come in the Crime Stopper hotline or things that we may recover that may lead us in another direction. But he's definitely somebody that I'm glad that we got off the street. Compliments to the men and women of the task force, but there's still a lot more work that needs to be done.
Have you been surprised at all by the volume of calls coming in since this arrest?
I'm not. This is a case that has touched the whole country, and some of the calls that have come in, something that we definitely need to take a closer look at. Unfortunately, there are some calls that are a little far-fetched as well. So we have to kind of vet every single call that comes in, see if it's something that has a little bit of a touch and feel to our case. And if it's something that we need to go out and investigate further, we'll do as such.
We've been told that the suspect's family is cooperating with this investigation, including his wife, his daughter who worked with him at his architecture firm. Do you have the sense that they had any idea he was potentially capable of these kinds of crimes?
So what I'm being told is when we initially informed them about their husband, their father, they were shocked. They were disgusted. They were embarrassed. So if you ask me, I don't believe that they knew about this double life that Mr. Heuermann was living, but time will tell. And once again, there's still a lot more questioning that needs to be done to the family, to friends, taking a look at some of the calls that are coming in and seeing what information we could gather to see if the family might have known exactly what Mr. Heuermann was up to.
So, folks, you hear from Rodney Harrison there, and not dismissing anything, but this is an investigation. We'll go where the leads and the evidence take us. Basically, he's saying that in so many words. Diana Cusimano Valentine, not discluding any good work having been done earlier by True Blue, but it was the very telling and conspicuously dismissed Charlotte tip that ultimately took the suspect off the streets. Diana, there's no denying that. There's no denying that. And I think maybe at a later date, when they really do an assessment on what happened here, we'll find out more about that. But right now, they took a dangerous individual. He's innocent till proven guilty, but they took an alleged serial killer off the street. And I think that we all have to be happy that they were able to do this. And then we can look back at what happened, how maybe this could have been done earlier. And, were there mistakes made? Absolutely. Lucy Bell, these perpetrators create so much pain and destruction in their midst. Their families are not spared. My heart goes out to everyone he harmed. Yes, Lucy, we all agree with that. There's many more victims here than the actual victims. We got their families, and then that spreads out. And, of course, we have the perpetrator's family, Rex Heuermann's family. As far as we know, the family was blindsided by this. That's what we're being told anyway. Folks, I've been on an hour and 23 minutes, setting a little daytime record here. I want to thank everyone for tuning in today. This case is so interesting, and I don't mean, or I don't want to be redundant, but I think it's important that we ask questions. And I ask the questions and throw it out there to you. Are there other areas they're going to need to search? Are there other victims not yet recovered? Where is the investigation going from here? What have we learned? A lot of people, of course, are asking questions about Asa Ellerup and the adult children, especially when Johnny Ray, the attorney, makes allegations against her. So some of these questions need to be answered, and Police Off the Cuff Real Crime Stories, I'm here to answer them. Guys, again, thank you so much for tuning in. Have a great day, and God bless.
One episode just ain't enough.